The expression, two-and-a-half-front war, has been heard in various forums, from time to time. When opposing armies meet on two geographically different fronts, a two-front conflict develops. During World War I, Germany fought a two-front war against France, Great Britain, Italy, Belgium, and later also American forces, on the Western Front, and Russia and later Romania, on the Eastern Front. The Bolshevik October coup, in 1917, brought an end to Russian involvement in the war, and a peace deal with Germany and Austria-Hungary was signed in March 1918. During World War II, Nazi Germany faced Allied France, Great Britain, Belgium, the Netherlands, and subsequently the United States, in the West, and the Soviet Union in the East, in a two-front war situation that was essentially comparable to the First World War. In the 1948 Israeli-Arab War, the Israelis fought Egyptians in the south, Jordanians in the east, and Syria in the north. In the 1967 Six-Day War, and the 1973 Yom Kippur War, Israel once again fought two-front conflicts. For India, a two-and-a-half-front war involves concurrently fighting a war, with China and Pakistan, on the northern and western fronts, as well as confronting internal security concerns, such as terrorism, naxalism, and northeast separatism. Let's start with two-front scenarios. India's military is now dealing with a reality that it has been dreading for over 2 decades. The country is locked in a two-front war, with hostile neighbours, all of whom are nuclear-armed. Over 100,000 soldiers, from the world's two most powerful militaries, are presently facing off, along the Indo-China border, the world's longest disputed border, which is mostly at heights of over 8,000 feet. It's a harsh endurance test, to see who blinks first, especially in the dead of winter, when temperatures may plunge to a bone-chilling 30 degrees below zero in certain regions. The threat of two-front war may play out in 3 ways. First, China and Pakistan may work together to launch a surprise, well-coordinated strike from both the north and west of India. Second, in a conventional military conflict between India and Pakistan, China might engage in strategic opportunism. A scenario in which a substantial conventional battle between India and Pakistan threatens CPEC assets, providing China reason to divert India by beginning a second fight along the LAC, is one possibility. Another variant might be the deployment of Chinese naval strength to divert and distract the Indian Navy from its coercive approach of blockading Pakistani ports. Third, a confrontation between India and China might allow Pakistan to mobilize its military against India. The first and second possibilities are the most likely, but the third scenario is highly unlikely, because the history of India-Pakistan relations provides some answers. Pakistan was a fervent US ally when China invaded India in 1962, but it did not take advantage of India's engagement with China by opening a second front. In the summer of 2020, the situation was significantly different. Pakistan maintains chilly relations with the United States, but a solid partnership with China. It was an opportune chance for Pakistan to inflame the Kashmir situation and capitalize on India's preoccupation with China. Pakistan's concern stems from India's aggressive reprisal for the Pulwama terror attack. The airstrike on the Balakot camp by India also ended Pakistan's nuclear blackmail. And the surgical strikes of 2016, which demonstrated India's prowess in conventional warfare. Pakistan is beginning to recognize its geographic weakness, particularly in areas where it lacks strategic depth, because all of Pakistan's major cities and populated areas are within 150 kilometers of India's border and are vulnerable to short-range Indian strategic missiles. Chinese weaponry have been supplied to Pakistan's military forces. However, some of the most essential components of its military might, such as F-16 jets and helicopters, are from the US. If Pakistan abandons the US in favor of China, it risks losing the technical advantage against India that only US-supplied armaments can provide. Pakistan's inaction, in respect to its relations with the US, demonstrates that the Americans still have power in Pakistan in 2020. Then there's the big question of economic aid, which the US controls through global institutions, like the IMF, and its oil-rich Arab allies, like Saudi Arabia. The Pakistani ruling class has strong personal and familial links to the West, particularly the United States. A high number of Pakistani generals' kids, daughters, and sons-in-law are US residents, green card holders, or students. Pakistan's stance might be influenced by the possibility of shutting off access to the West. This is more important than Kashmir or its national interest. The Americans are fully aware of Pakistan's vulnerabilities and take full advantage of it. The half-front scenario. Pakistan has a military strategy known as "Bleed India with 1,000 cuts." Pakistan instituted the 1,000 cuts strategy after losing 3 wars to India and the entirety of East Pakistan, which became Bangladesh. For the past decades, Pakistan's ISI has been providing training, weapons, funding, and intelligence in the Indian state of Jammu and Kashmir to a number of UN-designated terrorist organizations in their war of attrition against India. When a two-front war is in operation, Pakistan will not hesitate to use these groups against India. Beijing's support for India-centric terror organizations in the northeast India is a response to India's support for the Tibetan government in exile and the Dalai Lama. When the two-front war is in effect, China will provide moral and material assistance to terror organizations. The United Wa State Army and the Arakan Army, both designated terrorist organizations, are serving as Beijing's proxies by giving weapons and hideouts to militant groups in India's northeastern regions. China's assistance for militant forces groups operating in India's northeast, including Assam, Manipur, and Nagaland, will be the worst-case scenario for the military, as they will block supply lines and vital highways and roads from within to cut army supply lines when war is declared. According to General Bipin Rawat, the Indian Army is fully equipped to tackle both foreign and domestic challenges to the country. The army chief went on to say that, while India is prepared for a multi-front war, there are strong de-escalation procedures in place. The 17 Strike Corps is a new strike corps, formed primarily for mountain combat. It is India's first mountain strike corps, created as a quick reaction force, as well as a counter-offensive force, against China, along the LAC. The weather may also be used by Indian military forces to concentrate at critical times, in time and location, allowing them to destroy the adversary in distinct areas one by one. Though China's defense budget is said to be approximately 4 times that of India, this does not mean that the Indian army is weak in comparison to China, particularly in the Himalayas, where Indian forces are better trained for high-altitude fighting. When the Chinese PLA unexpectedly crossed the line of actual control to take the Finger 4 ridgeline, the Indian Army launched its own deception, with Operation Snow Leopard, and grabbed control of the dominant heights in the Chushul area, putting the vital Chinese Moldo garrison at risk. These heights and characteristics have provided India a tactical as well as a strategic edge on the ground and in bilateral discussions. The PLA did not anticipate such a swift and ferocious Indian response. It is critical for every military action, because without it, operations cannot be carried out or sustained. Logistics may be viewed as a link between deployed troops and the industrial base, which generates the materials and weaponry that deployed forces require to complete their mission. Intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance (ISR) is an important component of modern military operations. ISR systems that operate on land, sea, and air are most effective when they give actionable information to assist choices for military missions. The decision maker might be a theater-level commander, a squad leader on the front lines of a fight, or anyone in between. The SFF unit, also known as the Vickers Battalion, played a significant role in holding the strategic height, thwarting Chinese attempts to alter the status quo at the line of actual control. the covert Special Frontier Force (SFF) that outwitted the PLA, and took possession of a vital height, on the southern bank of the Pangongso, in eastern Ladakh. In addition to defending against the PLA, it conducts covert intelligence gathering and commando activities near the Chinese border. The real combat, for a two-front war, may take place on 3 or 4 fronts, including Arunachal Pradesh and Ladakh, against the PLA, and the mountains and plains, against the Pakistanis. Each theatre of operations has sufficient resources to combat any hostile activity by the enemy. This contains reserves to shore up the vulnerable sectors. Accurate real-time intelligence and surveillance deep inside enemy territory will be a force multiplier, allowing reserves to be replenished from low-threat zones. The IAF will offer its full assistance. If the PLA Air Force or Pakistani Air Force tries to build a favorable air situation somewhere, it will be vigorously challenged by concentrating air resources in vulnerable regions. The adversaries are unlikely to launch large offensives until they acquire air supremacy. As India modernizes its armed forces and competes with China, India is relying on a diverse range of vendors in the global weapons market, as well as its own indigenous capabilities. Because of the country's geography and absence of a formal alliance with the US, India has the freedom to diversify its supplies, but this comes at the expense of generating tension in the developing collaboration between Washington and New Delhi. General Rawat said that all armies across the world maintain an inventory in the ratio of 30-40-30. Here, 30% equipment is state-of-the-art technology, 40% is undergoing modernization, and the rest 30% is obsolete, which requires an upgrade. Will there be a 2.5-front war in the future? While the probability of such a situation occurring is questionable, it is the responsibility of security planners to consider all possibilities and devise contingency plans to cope with such events while keeping a balance. The level of preparation to deal with such situations is unlikely to be made public for obvious reasons. India has no desire to go to war. However, if a two-front conflict is imposed on her, the armed forces will fight to win, making the greatest use of geography, climatic circumstances, and available resources.